So in adding these strings, I didn't want to create anything that really stood out to the listener, but just some additional texture to follow the EP chords that I had recorded a little bit earlier. So also to match those chords, I played the same notes, I just played the right hand of those chords. So going back to the chords of the electronic piano, sounded like that. So on the strings, I just took the right hand and played those notes. I also made these not velocity sensitive and instead mapped the velocity to the mod strip. I'm not sure if you can see it in frame of the camera, but I'm controlling the velocity with the mod strip, which allows me to get some nice swells. So I just recorded those same chords as the electronic piano played, and it's just not going to add any more like harmonic content with it, no more notes or anything like that, but it's just going to add some texture and some nice sounds. So I recorded those and it sounded like this. So that's something that you can keep in mind as you're adding some instruments. If you just want to add some additional sound, some additional texture, you can play sort of the similar notes or the identical notes, but use a different instrument to add some additional sound. So that covered these strings there, and at this point the project was sounding pretty good as the development was coming along nicely. Now I also wanted to add some sounds to bring in a melody. Right now these sounds, the EP, the bass, and the strings are just sort of a nice chord progression thing going on there, but I wanted to add a melody. So to do that, I settled on a sound from Marble Rims, a cool synth lead. I added some delay and some reverb to make it sound as I wanted, but I went ahead and created a nice melody following the same minor pentatonic scale that the bassline used. And this is just going to actually sort of give the listener something to sort of catch on to, rather than the background noise of all the other instruments. So it sounded like this. So that was the melody that I decided on. And as I've created these machine projects, as I've sort of developed my own style of production, I've come to learn that you don't have to have all your instruments playing all the time in your patterns. You can bring them in, you can bring them out, and you can just have them play different phrases instead of playing the entire time. So I took that in mind with this synth lead and just had it play that melody once at the beginning and once in the middle. So if I talk about my sections as I had been for the bass, it plays in the first section of the chords, and the lead also plays in the third section. So it sounded just that same melody. I played it, just repeats it over twice. I thought about having two different melodies, but I figured since there's some space in between them, I can just play the same melody twice. So I recorded that, sounded like this. Now, in my last instrument that I wanted to use, I wanted to fill in the space left open by that melody. So I decided to use an organ from Vintage Organs. And I used this to fill in the sections within the project that the synth lead wasn't occupying. So I went ahead and just played around with some notes here, nothing too complicated, and it sounded like this. Like I said, I've been keeping the different sections in mind and making sure all the instruments are sort of working together. So at this point, I still really like the sound of the pattern. It sounded like this overall, and just give you an idea of what this led to. So as I mentioned earlier, this is more of a discussion or a presentation of my personal workflow rather than a traditional tutorial. It's really hard to say that there's one way of doing instrumentation in Maschine, but hopefully by talking about the things that I'm keeping in mind as I'm adding these instruments, hopefully by doing that, I can give you some helpful techniques that you can apply to your own workflow. Part of working in Maschine and part of music production in general is finding your own personal style. I really hope that somewhere in this long video you found some helpful technique that you can sort of bring into your own workflow and use for your future projects. As always, if you have any questions or comments relating to this tutorial or any of my other videos, feel free to leave them below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. And I will see you on next week's Maschine video.